Welcome back to Grinding to a Halt. Today I am speaking with Kaveh Hoda, mostly known for his work on the world famous House of Pod show, a medical humor adjacent, as he might say, podcast. He is also a GI doc, and I don't know how to pronounce it, but something to do with livers.
Yeah.
Um,
He- Give it a shot. Just try.
is
What,
it
what's
hepta? Is
you're close.
hepta
Hep's in there. Hepatology. Hepatology.
hepatology? All
Yeah,
right.
yeah. That's right.
So good. I got it.
Pretty
I got
good.
it.
No, you're closer than most. Pretty good. Pretty good.
So I appreciate you coming on. I am a big fan of your show. I think I originally found you just through mutuals on Twitter,
Hmm.
and then I discovered your show that way.
Oh, thanks,
And
man.
it's
Yeah.
it's a blast to listen to. You walk a very fine line between being very educational, like extremely educational at times, but making it palatable and understandable for someone like me who I know I should eat green things and I exercise, and that's about the extent of my knowledge.
That's pretty good, man. If you do those two things, you're in good shape. First of all, I thank you for having me on.
Yeah.
This is fun, and I want to congratulate you on saying my name correctly. That was really good, Kaveh. You did a good job with it. I know it's a super stressful thing. Like whenever I come on to a show, I can just, or sometimes when I have guests, I can
Yeah.
just see the panic in their eyes when they have to say my name, and they kind of like look out of the corner of their eye when they say it. They're like, Kaveh, and they kind of like check to see if they're saying it right, and oftentimes they don't, but I'm
Yeah.
not I'm not that hardcore about it. But you did a good job, so thank you.
Well, you even start your show by saying your own name and saying, I hope I'm saying that correctly.
There's a good chance I'm not.
But my approach to things like that, and this comes from being in marketing, is even if I'm wrong, I'm going to say it confidently and I'm going to power through.
Strong.
Don't let them see you sweat is kind of the
Strength,
approach.
strength of a white man in marketing. Fantastic. Good for
I,
you.
I do. I was talking to a coworker earlier today, and she was like, "Are you nervous about putting this kind of stuff out, or like hesitation around things like this?" And I'm like, honestly, like it is the blistering confidence that can only exist in a 6 foot tall straight white dude.
Yeah.
Like I'm just gonna power through.
Oh, I mean, listen, I mean, people, I mean, I'm off white as I
Yeah,
refer to myself, but I'm white enough that like I get away with stuff like this too. And it is true. It's funny in medicine, you talk to a lot of people in medicine, or I'll have a lot of people on my show who are doctors, and they're oftentimes very nervous. They're
yeah,
very nervous about it, and I'm trying to figure out why. And there's a fear of saying the wrong thing. There's a fear of being taken the wrong way. But honestly, like I feel as long as we don't punch down in our jokes, and
yeah,
I try to keep an open mind about every subject that I approach. I mean, I feel pretty good about it. I feel pretty good about it. Do sometimes people get mad? Yeah, sometimes, but like usually, if there's something I did wrong, I acknowledge it. But usually it's people who are gonna be mad
yeah,
and are gonna find a reason to be mad. And there's only so much I can do about that. So I do feel like you have to have some to do a podcast, you have to be a little bit egotistical in a way. You have to, it's weird. You have to assume people want to hear what you have to say, which is just nuts. Because
yeah.
why do they care? Why do they care? That's why I try to bring on guests that are smarter than me, because why would they care what I have to say? But like, there's always going to be that fear, and you have to just do it anyways.
Yeah. Well,
And
today I was saying, like, listening back to some of the episodes because I'm editing some earlier episodes I've recorded, and like I know I'm not good at this yet, and that's part of the process. Is like I talk for a living. I'm an account manager. My job is to get on calls, give people data a lot of times that they don't understand, try to present it in a way that makes sense, and then justifies the money that they're giving me to present them this data. And so my approach is just like I said, it's kind of just power through. I know what I
yeah,
need to say, I'm going to say it, and I'm not really going to think about it.
yeah.
So getting into podcasting, and especially doing it solo where it's all me, like I have the conversations and then I take it back and I have to listen to myself talk again. And like, man, that was really fucking dumb. Why did I say that? But I'm like, I'm just going to post it because episode 1 will suck. Episode 50 will be great. because I'll have 49 episodes in between where I'm going to
Yeah.
learn how to do this. And I won't let the fear of episode 1 keep me from the greatness that episode 50 could be.
Yeah, that's well said. I mean, I'm episode 207 and I feel like I'm not anywhere near where I want to be. You know what
Yeah.
I mean? I mean, so but it doesn't mean, I mean, what's the saying? I mean, this is one of those marketing sayings I'm sure you know better than me. Like perfect is the opposite of good or the enemy of good.
Yeah.
Like you can't expect to be perfect. You can strive for it, but you know, you'll find yourself improving. I mean, you seem like you're doing a good job to me, buddy. So I think you're doing fine.
Again, a white man's confidence.
There you
So
go. It goes a long way. It goes a
it
long way.
does. It gets me in a lot of doors. So
Yeah, yeah,
that's
yeah.
great. And I'm aware of it. So it's good that I can
No,
acknowledge it.
no, it's okay. You should make it clear. You clearly hate yourself for it, which is what makes it okay.
Yeah,
This is
I am
good. Yeah,
wearing a
yeah,
cut off shirt and sweatpants right now. So like it's
yeah. It's a look. You are sort of like you do kind of look like Colin Farrell. You know that, right? You have like that. You've been told that, like mixed with
I
maybe
have
Justin
not.
Timberlake. Like if Justin Timberlake and Colin Farrell had a love child, it might be you.
That's better. You know what I honestly get the most?
Yeah.
And it's really it's upsetting is Adam Levine. So like
It's the
typical
tattoos. It's the tattoos
it's
that,
right.
yeah,
But like
yeah,
I wear skinny jeans and white V-necks. Like if I'm
mm,
going out, it's skinny
yeah,
jeans and a white V-neck, and then like I've
yeah,
got the white guy haircut, as I call
yeah.
it. So I'm
No,
not
man,
doing myself any favors.
I like that you were
But
claiming that haircut from Richard Spencer. That's good, man. Take that shit back. Don't let that
look,
fucking guy take
after I
your
punched
haircut.
him, and it was me, I will take credit.
It could have been. It could have been. I believe it. I believe it would have been you.
That's a lot of preamble to get into what this show is about, which
Mhm.
is, and you kind of hinted on it, of, trying new things. You are a doctor. Why do a podcast? What is the drive? Because it's not like you have a job where you clock in 9 to 5 and it's low stress and
Yeah.
you are dealing with heavy shit.
Uh,
So
yeah.
why spend your time podcasting?
There's a lot of good reasons, and it's a fucking great question. Um, because it's something I ask myself a lot. but you know what? One of the things is, I've always had there's always been this other part of my brain. It used to be music. I used to do a
Yeah.
lot of music, used to be in a band. It still technically am, but we don't play as much anymore since COVID. And there was a part of me that needed that artistic expression. And part of the thing about starting a show was being able to like do that, get people on board that I wanted to talk to, be able to have conversations. And in a way, I found it to be like really the only form of real meditation that I had, which is
Yeah.
like you'd sit down with one person, and this was before COVID and it was all live at the time, before I started doing everything on Zoom. And you would just sit with that person across the table and you'd both be talking to each other. And that was it. That's all you
Yeah.
were doing. I wasn't thinking about like what I had to do at work. I wasn't thinking about like, was the stove on? I was just in that moment. And it was one of the few meditative things that like I really did. So it did and still fills that role for me. But then, shortly afterwards, COVID hit right after I started the show, basically. And I
Yeah.
realized that there was this other purpose to what I would need to do, which was that out there is so much misinformation. There is so much pseudoscience. There's so many people grifting off of people for medical knowledge. And I felt like I had to do something about that. So
Yeah.
part of the show, a big part of it now, is addressing that stuff and addressing it in a way that makes it fun. And I'll also still just do things that I want to do that are not necessarily medical and still allows me that freedom, that artistic expression. So it does a lot for me. It's the long and the short of it. But if we were normal, healthy people, would we do podcasting? No, probably not.
Absolutely not. No.
If there wasn't something missing in our lives, would we do podcasting? No, probably not. So there's always something missing, But
Yeah.
I do think it is a healthy. I do think it is a healthy outlet for me.
Yeah. No, for me, it is very much, yours is, it seems to be more on that educational side of, hey, there is injustice, especially around medicine. I know you've talked at length about our boy, the Liver King, about Goop, about all of
Yeah,
that shit, all those people who are destroying people's lives by claiming they know what's healthy for them.
yeah,
So counteracting that, and mine is just, hey, sometimes my job leaves me feeling unfulfilled, so
but
I want to do something creative.
but dude, that is like something that affects almost everybody. I
Oh
mean,
yeah,
I know people, I know doctors who don't find fulfillment. I know people who have jobs that would be traditionally considered very meaningful and important jobs, and it's not
yeah,
that they're not, but the people doing them still are looking for something else. And I think that that's something that's really relatable.
yeah,
So I mean, I think people want to hear that. I think people need to hear that. People need to know they're not alone when it comes to that sort of stuff.
yeah. It's funny because being in marketing and being very career focused, especially over the last 10 years, I spend a lot of time on LinkedIn, which is the absolute worst social media site. It is a cesspool. It is awful.
Mm.
Um, so my approach to it is, hey, I'm going to talk about how unhappy I am with the things I do for work sometimes. I'm going to talk about my mental health and how sometimes if I'm getting on a call with a client and my mental health is bad, I will go into almost a full panic attack and
Mm.
then have to calm myself down because then I have to get on a call and be the face of a company. And
Yeah,
like you,
right,
you
right.
can't be crying in front of a client.
Yeah.
That's bad
So
for business.
yeah, right. Yeah. There's optics that are
Yeah.
questionable about that. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So
But I mean that.
so oh, go
Sorry.
ahead.
No, go on. No, no. I want to
Oh,
hear this.
I was gonna say, so when I started talking about stuff like that, it started with people just they would DM me and they'd be like, "Dude, I feel the same way. Like sometimes I get in my car at lunch and I just cry because
Mhm.
I can't take the pressure of the job, but I feel like there's just this standard of everybody's doing this, everybody's pushing really hard, and burnout is just this acceptable thing culturally of, yeah, sometimes you hit a wall and you push through, and if you don't push through, this isn't the job for you. And we've
Yeah.
just accepted this as a norm. And my approach is that's bullshit, and no job should be worth your mental health. And if
Yeah.
it's affecting your mental health that much, it can impact your physical health by the way that your brain impacts your body, by the way what you're taking in, releasing toxins into your bloodstream by not being in a good place mentally. Like you can destroy everything about your body just by being depressed and not checking in on it.
Well, when you start talking about toxins like that, you make me nervous. You make my butthole clench when people start talking about toxins and that sort of thing.
Oh, I'm not
Well,
going to get into like
don't dupe
positive
me.
thinking will
Okay.
cure your
Okay. Yeah.
cancer or
Right. Right.
anything like that.
Okay. Good. Good.
I'm
But
not going to sell you a biofilm checker and then I'm going to give you a 5-step process.
I mean, it would be, I think, good radio if you did a coffee enema here on the show.
Honestly, I wrote it down. I was going to start with a joke that just said, as a GI, well, I had two options. First, it was going to be, I just took a coffee enema. Are you pro or against? And my other opener was going to be, thanks for coming on. I started a podcast because health insurance is too expensive and we're going to do a live colonoscopy.
That
Those were
would be good. Those are both good. Those are both solid. That's good, solid material, man. That is episode 20 material. So you're getting it at episode 5. That's fantastic. Um, no, dude, I think you're raising a lot of very, very important points. It is this it was happening before COVID, but it does feel like that was the pushing, that was the, I guess, the straw that broke the camel's back for a lot of people. And a lot of people are in the same situation as you, where they're just incredibly burnt out. They need a
yeah,
change. Something's not right. I mean, I get it. It's funny too how we all kind of think, well, what did people in the past do? Our parents and their parents' generation, they just worked and did everything they needed to do, and they didn't have social media. They didn't have these podcast outlets. They didn't have these other things to do. They just did their work and took care of their stuff. And it's true that to some degree that is true, but it's not like they were super healthy either.
yeah,
It's so funny. Every generation thinks the generation that comes after it is somehow more of a mess and should be more like them. And I'm like, I don't think I've seen a generation yet that seems to really have nailed it.
no,
It's not like the greatest generation for all their contributions in World War II were really healthy mentally people afterwards, and the boomers, of course not, Gen X, millennials, every generation is like kind of fucked up and assumes the next one is more fucked up than them, but I don't believe that's the case. I don't think
yeah,
we're any more fucked up than the people that came before us, but I do think there is something that's happening now where people are more vocal about it. I think
yeah,
people are, there's always been people crying in their cars at work, crying in their
yeah,
office, probably, self-medicating, not probably, definitely self-medicating
Hey,
with
I,
alcohol and
I
drugs,
I work in marketing. There's a lot of self-medicating in the
Yeah,
office.
right, right. So, that's it's always been there, but it does seem that like it's more publicly spoken about now, is my
Yeah.
impression at least. And I don't think that's a bad thing. I
No.
think it's a good thing. I mean, where else do we start,
Yeah. No, it's just it destigmatizes it. Like the leading cause of death of men between 18 and 35 is suicide. That's insane. Like there's no
Mm.
reason that should be happening, but it's a weird thing to talk about. And then when it does happen, it's viewed as some moral failure on the person's part who was struggling and decided to take their life. And that's something I've been at that point where
Yeah.
I have planned my suicide. I wrote my notes. I left my house to go do it.
No kidding.
And my wife stopped me. Like I am alive because she stopped me. Hope she's okay with me talking about this
Oh my
publicly.
gosh.
I talk about it sometimes. But oh, go ahead.
I have follow-up questions.
Oh
I have
yeah.
to ask. Okay. Because that's heavy, man. That's a
Oh
lot.
yeah.
That's a lot.
Yeah.
And I am impressed, and I think it's great that you're willing to speak about it, because I think there's probably people out there that need to hear it. Tell tell me a little bit more about how you got from there to here. Have you
Mhm.
been getting help? Did you get it right then at the time? Did you get checked in to some
Mhm.
place? Tell me about the process at that point, because I think it's really important that you didn't do it,
Yeah.
and why and how you didn't do it.
Yeah, no, it was first off a conversation with her about what I was feeling, why I was feeling what I was feeling, any ways that she could help. I am very much a person that internalizes everything. Growing up, we didn't talk about our feelings. I had a very strange childhood, not worth getting into, but internalized a lot of things, didn't talk about what I was feeling, didn't talk in general, and I'm not necessarily good at receiving compliments or receiving love
Mm-hmm.
because it's something I just didn't get a lot of as a kid. So for me, it's difficult to take those things in.
Yeah.
So when that situation happened and afterwards, it was immediately like, all right, you have to go get on medication. I've always dealt with depression, and it was always something I could manage on my own. For me, exercise has always been a big part of keeping that in check.
Yeah.
I was at a point where I was working out for 3.5 hours every single morning, and like that
Wow.
helped me achieve a baseline to be able to get through my workday. Like if I
Yeah.
missed a workout, working became kind of impossible. And so she was like, "All right, we'll make an appointment, go to a doctor, go get on some medication." I took some time off work, like to try to get everything figured out. I didn't have to go check in anywhere. But then I went to the doctor. The guy came in the room, didn't look up from the piece of paper, like made no eye contact with me.
Yeah.
And obviously, they have to ask a lot of questions because I was very honest. I was like, hey, I need to get on antidepressants because I'm having suicidal thoughts. So,
Yeah.
like, he was going through his checklist, doing his due diligence. He gets to the bottom of the list, and the last question is like, are you currently having those thoughts like now? I'm like, no, it's good. It was a moment and it's past,
Mm-hmm.
but I don't want that moment again. So let's get some medication. Let's
Yeah.
work this out. And his first response is, "Have you tried exercising?" And
Mm-hmm.
I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, dude, I worked out for 3 hours
Yeah.
and then I wrote my notes. Like, let's
Right.
not,
Yeah. Yeah.
let's,
Not
it's not
enough.
working anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So it was that. It was being more open about what I was feeling, about learning how to raise my hand, even
Mm-hmm.
within my marriage, and just be like, hey, it's a bad day. Even if she
Yeah.
had things that she needed to talk about, be like, hey, emotionally, I can't take that today. Like
Mm-hmm.
I'm at
Mm-hmm.
my limit. So it was about setting up guardrails
Mm-hmm.
around how I could protect myself and protect how I was feeling.
Yeah.
Um, and then making changes to my work situation of, hey,
Yeah.
there's things that I know I can deal with and things that I know I cannot deal with. So let's move away from jobs where they're giving me so much and the expectation is so high and the hours are so long
Mm-hmm.
that I
Mm-hmm.
can't have time to be down.
Mm-hmm.
And as someone who's been remote since COVID started, a lot of companies pushed very hard to get people to work more because, like, oh, now there's no commute. So, like,
Mm-hmm.
you start earlier, you work through lunch,
Mm-hmm.
maybe schedule some calls after
Yeah.
hours. Like, hey, you got
Yeah.
West Coast clients, you're at home now,
Yeah.
so it's easy to
It can
just,
be harder.
be on
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
call.
For sure. For sure.
So it was about setting up a lot of guardrails and then just being a lot more open. And then talking about it publicly for me is helpful. I think a lot of people that wouldn't work. But for me,
Mm-hmm.
like the more people know, the safer I feel. And I will make suicide jokes all day long.
Mhm.
And for me, it's like, hey, if I stop making jokes about killing myself, you should check in on me because that is a bad
Yeah.
sign.
Yeah, everyone has their tells, right? That's no, you're exactly right. Because some people, it won't be part of their process to talk about it,
Yeah.
and they can't. So, the fact that you are, I hope is helpful to those people. I imagine
Hmm.
it has to be.
Yeah.
Do you have this is what happens, by the way, when you invite a podcaster who asks questions onto your podcast. They ask you questions. Just you're the one
Hey,
being
it's
interrogated now.
conversational.
You're
I
right.
I have a format and quotes, but I'm like, we're a couple episodes in.
Yeah.
Literally nothing's been released at this point. It is
Yeah. Yeah.
whatever I want it to be.
Fantastic. Do you have a game plan should things change? Do you have like an action plan should you have more dark days or it becomes more difficult? What is that for you?
So I'm really good at seeing those things coming. Like I know when it's setting in. I know when I'm getting to a dangerous point long before I get to the dangerous point.
Mhm.
And where I was when this happened, I was so unable to talk about what I was feeling at that point that then internalizing it for me, it became I'm the problem. Like everybody would be better off if I was not around. So it was less about like, I don't know, people would be like, I just wanted the pain to end. I wanted these things to end. And for me, it was more, I don't want to be a burden anymore, was the way I felt.
Mhm.
Because it felt like me being depressed was bringing everybody else down. That I was going to be incapable to give everybody else what they needed because I
Yeah.
was incapable of dealing with what I was feeling.
Yeah.
So for me, those are things that I can see coming. Those are emotional changes that happen slowly over time to get me to that place.
Yeah.
Even to the point where like my wife knows to check in, like if I'm getting quieter at night, like if I'm not really talking, be
Mhm.
like, hey, are you good or what's going on? Do you need to talk about anything?
Yeah.
So it's very much a partnership between us of making sure I'm good to go.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really I mean, getting back to medicine and getting back to the topic of people like finding fulfillment in their jobs, I in the last 3 years, I know two people personally who have died from suicide,
Hmm.
and one of them was a doctor I very much looked up to,
Yeah.
who was ahead of me in training and helped train me, and I know it sounds very cliche because everyone always says this, but it's just the person you would not expect.
Yeah.
You would never expect. This person was so positive all the time and always appeared that way,
Yeah.
always appeared very positive. And he was all those amazing things. And he still is. Just because he died because of suicide doesn't make him not all those amazing things. He
Yeah.
he absolutely was. But he was doing a job working for a population that you would think you couldn't find much more fulfillment in your job, and still even
Yeah.
then um there was something else that was wrong, and he
Yeah.
wasn't getting the help he needed for whatever reason, and some of those things are not entirely clear to me, and it was really, and that stays with me, man, stays with
Yeah.
me. I mean, it's always a good reminder I think it's fantastic that you're checking with yourself. I honestly, not enough people do it both in a personal and a professional setting. I
Yeah.
think there are some jobs that are very good about making sure that they check in psychologically. There are certain jobs that people always assume you'll need that. But it's the kind of thing that everyone in any job should be doing. You should go to your physical health doctor and get your blood
Hmm.
checked and your blood pressure and all that stuff at least on an annual basis, no matter how healthy you are. And I think most people should check in mentally as well with some regularity as well. Whether that means they need to go to a psychiatrist or counselor, I don't necessarily know if that needs to be the case, but at least
Yeah.
do something that makes them check in to see how they're doing. I think the thing you have that's just really nice is you have a ton of insight into yourself about
Yeah.
that. And maybe you only got that because you went through this terrible process. I don't know. Maybe you had it before, but I don't think everyone has that.
Yeah.
So I think it is important for people to check in and take a step back and reevaluate what's working, what's not working. I think that's always a good thing.
Yeah, it's work to get to a place where you can do that honestly. Just look internally and be comfortable with what you see looking back at you.
Yeah.
Um, and I am one of those people where everybody knows, like, oh, if Zach's in the room, we're having a good time. Like, it's gonna be fun. I'm always gonna be making jokes. I'm always gonna keep everybody happy. I don't drink. I've always been completely sober, like no drugs, no alcohol, no nothing. So for me, I've always kind of overcorrected in social situations where like
Mm,
I will keep up, but I will 10x whatever anybody else is doing energy wise, because like that's
mm,
just what you got to do to keep up if everybody else is partying. So I was always like the hype man, but then internally that's exhausting. And so I wasn't good about taking the time to then re-regulate my body to like, all right, we're going to calm down. We're going to have like quiet time because I
yeah,
need a lot of quiet time. I need to just sit and think about how the day went, or if I'm feeling a certain way, why am I feeling that way? Like, why
yeah.
did this conversation I have, why did it make me feel whatever I'm feeling?
Hmm,
And how
hmm.
do I
Yeah,
process this out?
yeah.
And I, like you said, I don't think a lot of people do that. And I think it's a learned skill. I don't
Oh,
think you
for
can just
sure.
intuitively do it.
For
And I don't
sure.
think people are
Yeah.
willing to do the work because it's uncomfortable.
Oh, and I think people will do it, but I think you're right. I don't think we know how. I think most
Yeah.
people just don't have those skills, and I don't think I necessarily do either. I think it's important to do. I mean, the closest I come to it now is I try to meditate.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to talk about the studies that prove it works or not, because honestly, they're fine studies, but I don't know if they're super powered and strong enough to say that medically it works for everyone, but I do feel it's a thing I can do, and I think
Hmm.
it's something that people could do, but for some people it might be different. I mean,
Yeah.
you can find your own thing. I mean, and it's probably more than one thing you need. For
Yeah.
you, exercise is good, but it's not enough,
Yeah.
and you need some other checks in there to do that. I you know, I think it's commendable, man. I think it's commendable that you are open about it and you're working on it still. And I think there are so many people listening that are in the same situation and need that constant reminder. And I
Yeah.
think we all do need that constant reminder to check in with ourselves.
Yeah, because if you're feeling it, someone else feels the same way.
For
Someone
sure.
else has been
Yeah.
through it. But as different as people are, we are still also the same. There's
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's pretty depressing in that way. we're, we're all some
yeah.
variation of the same person. No, I agree. Yeah.
So, like you said, meditation
Yeah.
to help you kind of recenter and deal with things you're going on dealing with. But as far as like creative outlet, you said you are still technically in a band.
Yeah.
So has podcasting alone, has having deeper conversations kind of filled some of that creative gap that you
For
have from,
sure.
not
Yeah.
necessarily being able to get up on stage and play?
Yeah, for sure. No, it has been good in that way. It's been good for like just for my social interactions. I mean, it's
Yeah.
been good to like it gives you it's so dumb that we need it, but it's an excuse for me to like have a conversation with a
Yeah.
human being that is not about my job necessarily. I really
Yeah.
enjoy that aspect of my job. I think if I had a job where I didn't get to talk to people, it would really suck. So my job, being able to talk to patients and talk to other doctors, that's huge. But I also kind of want to have conversations about other things as well, and
Yeah.
it's an excuse to have that.
Yeah. Like the Spartan episode is great.
Right? Yeah,
There's
yeah.
nothing medical about that. It's just
No,
a fun conversation about
yeah.
misconceptions people have about Spartan soldiers.
Absolutely. I mean, there was some temptations to like, oh, should I try and twist this into something medical in some way? But I'm like, you know what? I'm not going to do that. Thankfully,
Yeah.
my listeners are cool enough with the fact that sometimes I'm going to do something totally not health related. And that's just something that fascinates me personally. And also there's a part of it, because I'm Persian, there's a part of like what I've learned over time is how Persians have been written out of history so dramatically. And to now we're starting to discover more about their contributions, everything from like, or the world is starting to learn
Yeah.
more. I mean, my grandparents obviously knew all this shit, but I did not. Like, our contributions from, neurosurgery, pajamas, high heels,
Yeah.
all these things like military strategies, all these things uh that we have just sort of been written out of. And it was fun to hear that episode from a historian who was able to sort of peel back some of that history a little bit and show us what may have actually been happening, not the popular culture things that we've
Yeah.
seen in movies like 300 or what basically is mainstream Hollywood. So that was just important for me, for no other reason, for me. And I'll do that every now and then with the show. For me, that's going to be important. It's kind of like, I almost think in my mind, I'm like, okay, I'm gonna do one episode for me. It's going to be about something I just want to talk about, and then I'll do a couple for the world, and then I'll do one for me, and then I'll do a couple for the world, and then one for me. I feel like if I can keep doing that and people stay with me, I'll be happy.
Yeah, so you've got your singles and your deep cuts.
Exactly. Yeah. This is the Spartan episode is, oh God, what I'm gonna try to think of a fucking, oh God, what's a good example? What's a good example of a deep cut from like a band that everyone would know? It's My Mean Mr. Mustard. Um Boy, I don't know. I don't think, oh no, you know what it is? Okay. You you're old enough to remember Smashing Pumpkins
Yeah,
and Siamese Dream.
yeah.
Okay, Rocket Man. You remember Rocket Man?
No.
No, no one remembers Rocket
At
Man.
least I'm honest.
Yeah, it's not. It's that, but that's exactly my point. Is it's a
Yeah,
song on the album that nobody cares. Nobody cares about. Nobody hums. Nobody ever like
yeah,
asks for that one. And it's Billy Corgan's favorite song on that album because it's really deeply personal to him. It's like it's
yeah,
about his brother. So that's what I will always have, some of those deep cuts on my show, for mostly for me. And then every now and then someone's going to dig it, and then you get an email from someone. They're like, that was really cool. And even if it's just like one person, you're like, that's fucking rad.
yeah.
Somebody affected somebody's life in a positive way. That's super cool.
Well, that's also the fun thing about podcasting as a medium is even if they're drawn in because of the topic itself, they're not going to stick around for the topic. If they don't like
Mhm.
you, they're not going to stick around.
Yeah.
And then if they like you, they're typically going to be on the ride for whatever you want to do next. Like I was talking to Alex Goldman yesterday, who he was on Reply All. And after moving away from that show, he put out a synth album. And I'm like, well, obviously, I like Alex Goldman. I'm going to check out the synth album.
Yeah.
And the
Right. Right.
synth
Right.
album fucking rules. And
Yeah.
I was telling him, I was like, dude, literally whatever you do next, I'm on board because
Yeah.
I like you. I like what you do. I like the way your
Right.
brain
Right.
works.
Totally.
So the content itself is irrelevant. It's about the
Yeah.
person at this point. It's the parasocial relationship of podcasting.
Yeah. It is interesting that way. I mean, I listen to a lot of podcasts just because you get used to those people. You want to hear
Yeah.
them. You know, you become sort of friends. It's pretty fun. Although
Yeah.
every now and then it is get a little bit weird when people think they know you in a way they don't. And
Yeah.
then that becomes a bit strange. Like, but in general, you know, I think you're probably the same way. I'm not like a different person on the podcast than I am in real life. I mean,
Yeah.
it's the same person. So, you know, you do kind of know me, but sometimes people can get a little too familiar in a way that gets a little creepy.
Yeah.
If you haven't had that yet, you will.
Not yet.
It's only a matter of time. It's only a matter of time. But that's the only downside to it.
Yeah, especially since you started off by telling people I look like the love child of Colin Farrell and Justin Timberlake. So
It could be worse, dude. I'm like Jay Leno and Seth Rogen, so don't fucking be upset about it.
it's pretty spot on.
Yeah, it's really sort of depressing. I'm like if Fred Flintstone and Mel Gibson had a love child, it would come out looking sort of like me. It's not great, man. It's not great.
But then you can say I'm a doctor, so you can,
Yeah, it
try
goes
to
a long way.
balance it out.
Yeah, sure, it goes a long way.
I
Yeah.
wouldn't know. It's like
Ah,
I've got tattoos.
you got tattoos. Yeah, that makes up for an MD. You
Same
do
thing,
that.
right?
Yeah, right.
One thing I like to ask people is, your professional life and your personal life, kind of finding the balance between those. Every job is performative to an extent. You are
Mhm.
not only performing the duties, but you have to be what people expect you to be in a role, especially as a doctor.
Right.
People like a doctor that can joke around, but
Mhm.
it is a fucking serious job. Like you are
Yeah.
delivering life altering news on
Yeah.
a regular basis.
Right.
So how do you kind of disconnect when you're having those days where it could just be bad news after bad news after bad news, and then you come home? Like, how do you find the balance of who you are in between those two things where because you care. You wouldn't get into this
Yeah.
profession if you didn't care, or if you got into it not caring. You wouldn't stay in it if you don't care.
It's a really good question. I mean, starting with the aspect of it at work, I mean, I do think it's important to have humor in my job, but you have to be careful about it. I'm not like Patch Adams with like a rubber nose, you know. You have to also sense sometimes when you're talking to people whether or not it's something that they are okay with. I do find that, you know, people are really nervous when they come to see me, especially because I have to do procedures, and some of them are sort of
Yeah.
advanced procedures that can have some risk, and they're scared about what they may find and what they may see. And the vast majority of them want to know that I respect them as a human person. And
Yeah.
one way I can do that is by talking to them like normal people. I
Yeah.
try to talk to people with respect whenever they're my patients. I always try to make sure that's how you lead, with respect, and that they know that I care. If they know those two things, they the rest is easy. Most people I can sense want some humor, enjoy it, and I'll make a joke and they'll laugh a lot. And
Yeah.
generally, my patients like me because of that. And I think a big part of that is because they can tell I'm looking at them like they're real people.
Yeah.
I don't I used to do this, and a lot of doctors still do, and I don't. It's not for me. It may work for other people, but code switching is just not something I want to do. Like there
Yeah.
are doctors who will come out and they'll be like, they'll have a very different doctor voice. So it gets deeper when they talk to patients and they
Yeah.
get
So
more
it's
serious.
serious.
I don't do that. I don't want to do that. I want to be myself, but I will oftentimes be a version of myself that's the most calming to a patient.
Yeah.
So, I try to bring that energy. It's like if you have a pilot in the plane, you don't want the pilot to be like nervous. I mean, yeah. Uh, Today we're flying really, really high. We're gonna get we're gonna get way up there, like 30,000 feet. You know, you want them to sound confident, and you want them, and if a pilot makes a joke every now and then in the right situation, I think it works really well. But they have to lead by knowing that they're there to take their job seriously. They
Yeah.
respect us, who the people that they're working for, basically, and then everything else is gravy on top of that. So I think that's really important to find a way to be yourself in
Yeah.
medicine. Like I know a lot of doctors who are deeply unhappy with their profession, and a lot of it's because like they went through all there's so much bullshit you have to go through.
Yeah.
There's like the pre-med stuff, the tests you have to take, and then there's internship, and then there's residency. In my case, there was chief residency. On top of that, there was a liver transplant year. On top of that, there was 3 years of GI fellowship. There's all these things you go through, and so many people don't ever stop to think about whether or not it's what they want to do or not. They just
Yeah.
power through. They just power through, and they get through
Yeah. The
this step,
train's
next
moving.
step.
You
Right,
stay
right.
on board.
Yeah, it's a very linear process, and it requires you to jump over a lot of hurdles and break through a lot of walls, but you eventually will get there if you want to. But then a lot of people get there and they're like, they don't really know how to be themselves anymore. They don't know how to be. It's hard because, you know, there is like this stunted sense of growth for a lot of people who go into
Yeah.
medicine. Like in college, you're learning a lot, or for people around that age, you're doing things, you're growing a lot emotionally, intellectually. But then when you're so focused on these things you have to do to get to medicine, you kind of stop working on yourself in a way.
Hmm.
And I think that's something doctors need to keep doing. That's something I want to do with my show too, is show them that they can be all these things. They can be rigorous academics, they can be super caring, gifted physicians, but they can also be fun. They can also be
Yeah.
themselves. And if being fun is being themselves, that's great. If they're just
Yeah.
not a fun person, they're a serious person, that's cool. Be that too.
Yeah.
But like be yourself,
Yeah.
because I think that's in a way, I feel like that's the best way to respect your patients too.
Plus, some people might not want a doctor that is fun to be around. They might want that serious doctor who's just there
Exactly.
to get things done and move
Right.
forward. And there is no small talk. There's no getting to know you.
Right.
It's ABC. We're done. Let's get out of here. Uh,
Absolutely. Yeah.
yeah, it's important that you lead with yourself and not have to like hide who you are.
Sure. Yeah.
Obviously, you alter things a bit. I can't get on calls with clients and always say what I'm actually thinking
Sure.
because I'll,
Right.
I'll
Right.
lose my job. But they're still going to get me. They're going to get a slightly altered, work
Version
appropriate
of you.
version of me.
Right. Yeah.
But it's
Exactly.
gonna be me. I'm
Yeah.
definitely beyond the point in my career where I would, lie on the interview. I would give you the guy that the company website says you need, so I'm gonna give you that version of me.
Yeah.
But that's not who I am, and I'm so far beyond that. Like I will give you 100% me at all times
Yeah.
because that's how I'm gonna be happy in whatever role I do.
Yeah. And
because
you're
we're
going
gonna
to be
have
better at your job for that. That's
absolutely.
going to make you better at your gig. Yeah.
Yeah. And everybody benefits. Like because I will be happier. I will perform better, but I'll be happier. And a
Yeah.
company full of people who feel comfortable being themselves is a company that's going to perform better and it's going to retain people. Marketing has a high turnover rate. If you're somewhere 18 months, you're a senior person. That's kind of how
Mhm.
it works.
That's wild.
So, like, I know people
What
who every 6 months they're at a different agency because every 6 months you can go find a new job.
same job, just different places.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Turnover rates are very high. Super competitive. People get poached like crazy. There's no lack of recruiters in my
Mm-hmm.
LinkedIn DMs
Mm-hmm.
just asking what salary requirements I'm looking for. Like conversations
Yeah.
will start that way.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so you don't necessarily have to learn how to be good at certain companies because you know
Mm-hmm.
in 6 months I can just go somewhere else.
Right. Right. Yeah.
And then it does become a confidence game of hey, can I bullshit this for a few months until somebody offers me
Right.
more money?
Better job.
Yeah,
That seems like, I gotta be honest with you, that seems like a lot of jobs outside of medicine to me. That seems like a lot of jobs. That's the one thing about medicine that I really like, I will say, is that like I don't have to hold on a second. I'm gonna look this up real quick. I don't know if you edit or not on this show. You don't have to, but there's this is hold on a second. You're this is before your time.
I'm 53 by the way.
God damn,
53.
you look good for
Yeah, I
53.
know, right?
I
Right.
don't believe it because you're white, and if you were 53, you would look 73. Sorry, white people. Sorry, I'm just kidding. Just kidding. I'm basically
It's
white.
it's
Just
it's
kidding.
true though. It's true though.
Hold on a second. Okay, in the words of Lloyd Dobler from Say Anything, Lloyd Dobler, I don't want to sell anything, buy anything, or process anything as a career. I don't want to sell anything bought or processed, or buy anything sold or process anything sold, bought or processed, or repair anything sold, bought, or processed. As a career, I just don't want to do that. So I felt like medicine was a good way for me to live out that quote. It's like
Yeah.
I don't have to, other than you kind of alluded to this too. You do have to sell yourself a little bit because you have to people should have confidence in their doctor. So you
Yeah.
you don't want to be look like a schmuck, but the good thing about it is, you don't have to pretend to be anything. You're not trying to sell it. A good doctor shouldn't be trying to sell you on something. It should be, telling you, giving you the what's happening, the facts,
Yeah.
what we know, what we don't know, and helping guide you in those decisions. So that's something I really appreciate about what I do. And when I see people in the real world who have to do shit like that, I don't think I could do it. I don't have the capability to do it.
It is it's weird
You're
because
you're the real hero here, Zach, is what I'm trying to say. You're the real hero here.
well, I was gonna say like you are in the two most noble professions, medicine and podcasting. So I appreciate your service.
That's right. Right.
But like people ask every time you meet someone, they ask what you do. Like that's always an introductory question. And like I can say I work in marketing, but that is the most like they could think Don Draper or they could
Yeah.
think like a sleazy guy. Like I guess that's the same thing. But
Yeah.
that like it's so obscure. Like there's no answer to that. So like my day to day, the way I explain it to people is other people do all the work and then I talk about it. That is my job. I don't do any real work outside of emails, putting together some reporting and talking to people. Like I don't
Mhm.
functionally have to know how to do a lot of stuff. I just have to be able to speak clearly and concisely,
Yeah.
uh, which
Which
is
is
great.
it's
It's
just
it,
more rare than you think. If I'm being honest, I mean, like, you know, it's a sort of a joke, but sort of not. Like, anyone can do podcasting, for example. Really,
yeah,
literally anyone can, but it's hard to do it consistently, which is the
yeah,
thing. And that's the same thing with being able to communicate. Like, your job requires you to consistently communicate
yeah.
and communicate well, and that's harder than I think people give you credit for. So I think it's probably going to lend itself well to podcasting, but I see that as something that's an important skill for all of us to have.
And it is a learned skill. I was a silent child. I did not speak. I was
Mm,
uncomfortable talking to people, and it was something I just forced myself to do. Over time, I got really good at just speaking publicly because I just made myself do it.
When did that happen? Roughly.
I mean, like early teens, but as a kid, so I was homeschooled. My only social interaction was church.
Okay,
I was
this is
raised
explaining some stuff. I'm seeing the onion is being peeled back here.
very Southern Baptist.
Okay.
Um, but homeschooling for us meant we just stayed home. There was no educational aspect of it.
Less schooling, emphasis on the home.
Yes.
That's
So,
fucking crazy.
because of that, when I was in social situations at church, let's say I was called on to read. At 10, I could not read yet. No one had taught me how to read. So I
Wow.
had to learn, how do I talk my way out of this without making it obvious I'm incapable of doing the thing they're asking me.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That lends itself very well to being an account manager. Those are one-to-one skills.
That
Um,
is
so
fascinating, though. That is fascinating. Like, I mean, I just did an episode about glossophobia or fear of
yep,
public speaking,
yeah,
and it's so funny that the fear of public speaking wasn't the issue as much as the fear of being caught or found out,
yeah,
and that's sort of how you became comfortable with public speaking, was
yeah.
this other greater fear. That's really fascinating.
It's kind of like comedians who will say they learned to be funny because they were getting beat up. Like,
Mm-hmm.
if I tell a joke, nobody will beat me up. And so
Yeah,
mine was like, if I'm just charming enough, like, or if I can talk my way out of this, no one will know that I can't read,
right.
which
Yeah,
is a very funny thing to say as an adult. But like, as a little kid, it is panic inducing
absolutely.
because
Yeah,
everybody else can do it. So then there's that othering feeling of something's wrong with me, something's
absolutely.
broken.
Yeah,
How do I hide this? How do I mask this?
yeah,
And for me, learning just to communicate verbally when I could not read
yeah,
was a way to do it. It makes for a fun story now. I joke
yeah.
about it a lot. Anytime I'm on Jort Center, Josh or Will give me shit about it because they know about it. And so, like, I tell everybody, I
Fuck those
think it's
guys. They barely can read. I
also,
made Will read a book for the episode he came on. Made him read.
so,
Is a good egg. He's a good egg. You know.
so yeah, I think that was really what got me into it. That's what got me over that fear. The fear of public speaking was lesser than the fear of finding out, of people finding out what I couldn't do.
Yeah.
And then I just pursued it because it turned out I was good at it. Like, because I had to learn to do it, it was a
Yeah.
natural skill set that I could then lean into. And it's gotten me pretty far. It's worked out really well.
Yeah. Yeah. That's good, man. You turned you turned it into a strength, and that's all we can do with the ordeals that we're sort of faced with.
Yeah. Yeah, you make the best of it. I couldn't spell lemonade, but I would turn those lemons into lemonade.
That's good.
All right. I did have a couple other questions I wanted to ask, and I do want to
Yeah.
be, mindful of your time. You're busy, man.
Oh, you're good. You're good.
Over the last few years, you kind of alluded to this, kind of the change in people's perception of doctors or the medical field as a whole, but also people just Googling things or watching TikToks and being like, hey, here's what's wrong with me. How do
Yeah.
you combat that? Because people, and I'm not saying people are always wrong. I personally have had instances where we have found things through our own research and taken that to a doctor and they're like, oh, yeah, no, that is what's actually wrong with you.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it can be helpful.
Yeah.
But
Sure.
people who are like, hey, I've only eaten steak for the last 45 days because I watched this video. Like, how are you deprogramming the brain worms that these people now have from
That's
social media?
yeah, it's a really good question. I mean, I'll start with one aspect of this, which is that, you know, in the past, a long time ago, being a doctor did have like a higher credibility in
Yeah.
the general population, and it was a much more respected gig. In fact, the name of the show, The House of Pod, is based on a book called The House of God, which is a book that came out like 40 something years ago, which was like the first time it was really notable. It's considered a really important book because it was one of the first times that someone had shown medicine in a realistic light, in a realistic fashion. And that affected the way, that some people looked at doctors, and I think over time we've seen more and more that the way people look at doctors now isn't so much as, on a pedestal, the ultimate answer, the most prestigious job. And that might be good in some ways, And
Yeah.
I think in some ways it's probably good because, you know, I don't think a doctor necessarily needs to be the person who tells you exactly what to do. I don't think that sort of patronizing culture of medicine should still be there. I think getting
Yeah.
to the other point of what you said is that now I feel like we should be sort of shepherds along the way and help you along the way, making the decisions, giving you the information. We can make recommendations, but they have to be decisions based on what the patient wants, what's in line with what the patient wants and their needs.
Yeah.
And I think it's good in some ways that it's become a little bit less of that top down patronizing sort of approach with medicine. To that, I am okay when people go and do their own research. I think
Hmm.
usually it's cool. The problem is sometimes people will have something firmly in their mind about what it is, and it may not be that. And I may know
Yeah.
that because I have
Yeah.
years of training that show me that, or I've done a test that said it's not that. And that's hard. I do think patients should advocate for themselves. Absolutely. I think they should. And I think they should find a doctor that's listening to them and is able to, if they disagree, explain why. You
Yeah.
know, a doctor may not agree that the thing you looked up was what you had, but they should be able to tell you why. You
Yeah.
shouldn't leave there feeling like you weren't even heard. So I think medicine these days should be much more of a team effort. And by that, I don't just mean like doctors and nurses and other medical professionals, but I mean with the patient themselves. So
Yeah.
I think that's good. I like it when people do some research, you know, I think it tends to be good as long as they're open, you know. People say, well, you know, I'm just asking questions because I want to get to the truth. I mean,
Yeah.
that's a good thing, but also people, and this is not just about patients, I'm talking about like people like questioning the vaccines. People should question it and ask, but then once you get an answer, you should believe it also.
Yeah.
You know, that's a real big thing with the vaccine, the anti-vaccine movement. You hear constantly people are like, oh well, you know, I'm just asking questions about this, and
Yeah.
that's great. Ask the questions, but here are the answers. We're giving
Yeah.
them to you. You have to at some point then believe when they're being provided to you. You know what I mean? Which is a stretch from what most people do. And again, to answer
Yeah.
your question, I like it when people come in prepared and have thought about it and have questions or looked up things.
So you were saying, you kind of do the one for me, two for them methodology with the podcast. What is an episode you've been thinking about doing that you would love to do that is
Mm.
so far out of left field from the conceit of the show? Is there one that like you
I've
have
kind
kicking
of been
around that you're like this would be a
mm,
blast to do?
good question. I've kind of been doing them already. I've kind of been sort of pushing those boundaries about what I like to do, having musicians on
Yeah.
to mostly talk about music, or, you know, having actors on to talk about that, or so I don't know. I feel like I'm already kind of doing it. There are some medical topics I want to cover that are weird. There's one I've been kicking around for a bit that I'm going to probably bring up, but it's hard to find somebody who's an expert in it. But there's a disease called Kuru, which is a disease where it's a psychiatric disease where a man starts to think that he's been cursed by a witch, and his penis is starting to shrink into his abdomen. And once it disappears, he will die. And you laugh, but this is the thing that's been written about. And I'm like, I kind of got to do this episode, but I got to like find somebody who knows about it. And it's not the kind of thing you find in it's in very rare parts of the world where this exists. It's a very culturally based sort of like psychiatric illness. So I'm like, I'm probably going to do that. Probably going to keep doing weird shit like that. And then, yeah, I'm every now, like, here's another example. You ever watch Goonies?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
So trying to get Chunk on my show right now because he's one of my mutual friends, and
He's a lawyer now,
he's a
right?
lawyer now. And
Yeah.
I have no reason to talk to him other than I just have questions for Chunk. You
Yeah.
know, and I've actually met him before at Berkeley where he was where he used to go. But I think it'd be fun to get him on the show and talk about some stuff. So yeah, I'm gonna keep doing that. I'm gonna keep just like whenever I see somebody where I'm like that person's really interesting. I want to get them on my show. Like the Chef Reactions, the guy who does
Dude, I
like the
would
chef
love to
thing.
talk to him.
Yeah,
Would
like
love it.
so. Yeah, great. I mean, actually, and you'd be surprised. It's like a lot of these people seem like big gets, but you can get them. Actually, the one I regret not having done earlier because I kind of like hemmed and hawed on it for a while. And I'm like, should I even try? Was I want to get Mark Lanigan on the show.
Mhm.
And I just started the process of doing it before he died. And that would have been a really
Yeah.
interesting episode. He was kind of an anti-vaxxer, which would have made it kind of an interesting take.
Yeah.
But that changed after he got COVID and he got really, really sick. And then he kind of changed his perspective on it. For listeners who don't know, Mark Lanigan is a pretty famous singer out of the Northwest of the US, where he was in the band Screaming Trees and a big part of the grunge movement. So that I just thought that would have been fucking fantastic to get him on the
Yeah.
show. And I kind of hemmed and hawed on it too long. And by the time I got around to it, he died. And I
Yeah.
regret that. So I'm not going to hesitate as much in the future. If I
Yeah.
find someone I just think that'd be fun to talk to them, I'm just gonna get them on.
That's what when I was outlining what I want this show to be, so like as I was figuring out taglines and naming the show, as I was doing that, I was putting together like, oh, here's the gets, like people I know I can get, people that either I've worked with or people that I have mutuals with that I could probably get on the show pretty easily. And then I have my dream list, and there's like two that might be relevant in like a business sense or an overall theme, and the rest are like, it would be really fucking cool to just talk to these people.
Yeah, totally.
And that's
Totally.
kind of the point. Like if I can
Huge,
find an
huge.
in and I can
Yeah.
talk to someone that I find interesting, yeah,
Yeah.
let's do that all day long.
Yeah.
I don't care what the topic is. I just want to pick their brain.
Totally.
Like I read a lot of Stephen Graham Jones books. I don't know if you're familiar with him. He's a
I'm not,
horror
yeah.
writer.
Yeah.
I don't care what we talk about. I would just love to talk to him.
I do. You should try. I'll tell you the truth is I found that having authors on is a great way to go
Mhm.
because authors don't have usually a big machine behind
Yeah.
them for publicity. And so they are looking for ways to get it out there. And if you're someone who likes to actually read, I mean, most of the reviews they probably get and most of the interviews they do are probably with people who haven't even read the book. But if you're
Yeah.
into it and you want to read it, I think it's great, man. I think you should do it. We just did one with a guy who wrote, does horror, who just wrote a book called Whalefall about a scuba
Oh yeah,
diver.
I read his novelization of Shape of Water. The
Yeah,
one
yeah,
with
exactly.
Guillermo
Yeah.
del Toro. Yeah.
Right. So like those are really fun interviews for me. I'll be honest, I don't know how the audience loves interviews with authors and books, but who gives a fuck? I mean, you enjoy it, the listeners will likely will feel that. If you're a musician on stage and you're enjoying yourself, there's a really good chance the audience will too.
Yeah.
I do believe that.
Yeah. No, because it's all about the energy and how you're feeling about what you are doing.
Yeah.
And I've told people like I really don't care if anyone listens. Like it's for me and it's for me alone. Like
Yeah. No,
I want to talk. I want to talk to people I want to talk to.
This is therapy, man. There we go. We're back to the beginning. This is all about therapy.
Full circle. All right.
Yeah.
I've taken up enough of your time. I
You
really
sure
appreciate you. Apologies. I'm a scumbag.
No, I had a blast. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for having me.
Cool. All right. Where can people find you? Where can they follow you? Where can they check out your work?
Listen to us anywhere you get your podcasts at the House of Pod. I am on Twitter still, and I hate myself for it.
We all are.
If you're there, you can follow me at the House of Pod. I'm on other sites too. So if you're on Blue Sky, find me there at I think the House of Pod or Kaveh MD. I'm not entirely sure, but if you look up the House of Pod, you'll probably find me. And find me on those other places and follow me there. The more people that follow me there, the less likely I have to stay on Twitter.
Yeah.
Just listen to the show. That's it.
Cool. And I will tell people they should, even if they don't follow you on Twitter, they should go check out your pinned tweet because it is worth it. It's a good one.
It's my Mona Lisa.
It is perfection.
So for the listeners, let me explain. I've had a couple viral tweets, but the most viral was a green skeleton on a Peloton, and it's one of those dumb, you've heard of Elf on a Shelf ones, and it went so viral, like it went crazy viral, and then people were messaging me and being like, "Hey, how do you craft a viral tweet?" And I'm like, I don't fucking know, because basically my strategy is think of the dumbest thing you can think of, then make it 2 times dumber, and then just hit post, hit tweet and send it out. And that's my best tweet ever, was that some tweet.
It's anytime someone emails you or messages you about how to craft a viral tweet, just give him Will's email address and just be like, "This is the guy.
Yeah,
Go
he is the
talk to this
guy.
loser."
He is. He is amazing. Very impressive. Very impressive. Very impressive.
Awesome. All right. Thank you so much.
My pleasure, man.
And have a good evening. It was good talking to you.
You too, buddy.